Well, welcome. I'm Gina Hanna. I am the Outreach and Compassion Pastor and the North Kansas City Campus Pastor for Vineyard Church, Kansas City. I want to welcome you here into this study that we are doing. We are in the second week of a church-wide series and group study called Miracles. And this study is going along with the weekend service. So if you haven't had a chance to watch Pastor Greg's message from this past weekend, you can find it. You can find it on our Facebook page. You can find it on YouTube or at vckc.com. But what we're doing in this series is we are going back and we're looking at the miracles that Jesus performed when he was here on earth. And the cool thing about it is we're not just hearing about something that's happened in the past. We're studying this because we're finding that when we have a personal relationship with Jesus and we receive his Spirit, by the power of his Spirit, we actually get to experience these miracles today. Whether they're in our lives or in partnership with him, we get to be a part of seeing it happen in other people's lives by the power of the Holy Spirit. So this week, in the study this week, Pastor Greg taught us about the miracle that happened with Simon Peter when he invited Jesus into his boat. And Jesus said, I know you've been fishing all night long, you haven't caught anything, but throw your nets out now. And Simon Peter took a step of faith and obedience, just like Pastor Greg talked about. We invite Jesus into our boat, and then we take the step of obedience. And when he did, he got to experience a miracle that was God-sized. They pulled in nets of fish that were so big that the nets were breaking and it almost sunk the boat. I love this miracle because it's not just something that happens to some people. When we truly invite Jesus into our circumstance, into our situation, then we get to experience God-sized things that are more than we can think or imagine because his ways are so much greater than our ways. I want to share a story with you of my own personal experience with this. I'm telling you, I could write a book of hundreds of them because God is so good. But I want to share the story of how God started our ministry. And I want to caveat here, just because this has to do with going into full-time ministry does not mean it won't happen in your own life, because it truly happens to all of us when we invite Jesus into our circumstance. And we all have a kingdom purpose. We have a kingdom purpose in our marriages, in our homes, with our children, in our workplace, every aspect of our lives. So when we call Jesus and invite him into that kingdom purpose, ask him the next step to take. You will experience miracles that you can't even imagine. But for me, it does have to do with us starting Beauty for Ashes, which is a prison ministry. Many of you know my story, but you may not. I went to prison back in the day. And when I got out, I went right back into my addiction. And in that place, I was frustrated and I asked God, why did I go to prison if I just can't quit? And that night, he gave me a vision. I could see a wing of the prison, and I didn't know what we were doing, but I knew someday I was going to go back to prison. I was going to do a program in the prison. And he told me, once you figure out how to get set free, you'll go back. Well, fast forward 10 years, I took Oaks of Righteousness, got delivered from my addiction, and the time was now. We got to go to prison. But I don't know how to go to prison. I mean, the right way. So I didn't know what to do, but I felt like the Lord said, don't look at the big picture, just take the next step I have for you. So I'm like, okay, what's the next step? Take VI, which was Vineyard Institute. It's a training they have for pastors in the Vineyard movement. I wasn't planning to be a pastor, but I took the next step. I took VI. The next step they had in that was we had to do a leadership project every quarter. So I'm like, okay, Lord, what's my leadership project? Do something for the homeless because they're similar to the prisoners. So I came to find out a friend of mine, her name was Desiree, was running a homeless shelter called Hope Faith. It was a day center. So I connected with her and I told her I want to do a one-day retreat where I want to serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And she said, well, this works perfect. We're not open on Sundays. You can do it on Sunday. And I felt like we were supposed to start going down every week and praying with the homeless. So we started going down every Tuesday. And when we would show up, she'd say, there's people down in the basement that can pray with you. And by the way, on March 3rd, they're going to have this retreat. Be sure to sign up for it. They're going to serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They need to know how much food to bring. So we got a week out from the retreat. We looked at the sign-up sheet, and there was 20 people signed up. And Desiree said, now, Gina, don't get your hopes up. Probably only 10 are going to remember to come because, not everyone has a calendar to remind them. And so I prayed about it, and I felt like the Lord said, no, I'm going to double it. Prepare food for 40. So I got our team together. We brought food for 40 people, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And we showed up to the center on March 3rd. Now, little did we know it was going to snow the night before. So it snowed on March 2nd, which is weird in itself. And when we got there, there was a line of people around the building wanting to get in out from the snow. And we were freaking out. We only had food for 40 people. And when we opened the doors, 150 people walked in. But we fed them with the food that was for 40. It stretched. That was a miracle in itself. And the Lord showed up on this day, and people were praying with each other, and we talked about grace and forgiveness. And Desiree, when she showed up, she said, Gina, God is doing something here. He has started a ministry here. And I'm like, that's awesome, but I want to do prison ministry, and I don't know how to get into prison. I don't want to do homeless ministry. And she said, oh, well, that's crazy. I just met a guy yesterday who does full-time prison ministry. He's going to be here on Tuesday. Are you coming to pray with people on Tuesday? I'm like, I will be there. And I met this guy who worked for a ministry that had a wing of the prison, and he described that vision God gave me. And through that connection, the next week we were in prison. And then the next week we were teaching a class at Lansing Correctional Facility. The next year we were doing Oaks of Righteousness there. And the next year we took over that wing back in the prison where I was incarcerated. And we made Beauty for Ashes Reentry, where we help people get set free. God had a big fish and nets for me. All I had to do was take the next step. And it's the same for you. Whatever is going on in your life, wherever you need the Lord to move, invite him into that circumstance and ask him, what's the next step? And I promise you, he will fill your nets to overflowing. I'm praying for you as you go into your discussion with your group that you will discover where it is you want to invite the Lord into. Have a great discussion, and we'll see you next week.